Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Tim Jennings Show, where we seek real answers to life problems. I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, here with Susan Collenberg.
Good afternoon, everybody. And we are going to be discussing codependency, healthy love versus love addiction. We're going to begin with a question from one of our listeners. Myrna writes, Dear Dr. Jennings, I have really enjoyed watching your God in Your Brain seminar. I notice you speak a lot about lies and selfishness, leading to bad actions like egotism. But you hardly scratch the surface when the codependent personality defect, which I think many Christians suffer from. I hope that you can talk about this in your next broadcast. So, Dr. Jennings, can you describe what mature, healthy love is in contrast with dependency?
Yeah, so mature love is a love that is actually interested in the welfare of another. And mature love comes from a person who's at peace with themselves and has a sense of wellness within, and therefore they have something of themselves to give, to bless, to build up, to invest in another person. So healthy love is other-centered, giving for the well-being of another being. Codependent love is I love the other person for what they can do for me. I need something from them. I feel inadequate. I'm only whole when you're with me. You fill the void in my life. And instead of being an actual love and other-centered motivation, it is a fear-centered motivation, fear of not having that person, fear of not being valued, fear of being abandoned and lonely. And so there's a sense of desperation and urgency, and people can do lots of things to demonstrate what they think is love, but it's really all about getting something from the other person. That's a dependency relationship. Okay. I remember I was consulted to see a man in an ICU many, many years ago for an overdose suicide attempt. When I walked in to see him, and I was taking his history, he told me that his girlfriend had just broken up with him. And that's why he was in the ICU. And I said, so help me understand that. Your girlfriend breaks up with you, and then you took an overdose. So what were you trying to achieve with the overdose? I said, did you want to die? He said, no, I didn't want to die. I said, well, what did you overdose for? He said, well, I overdosed because I wanted her to come back to me.
Wow.
And I said, so you weren't actually wanting to die? No, I wanted her to feel bad for breaking up with me so that she would then come back to me.
Right.
You see, that is not a love-based behavior. That is a selfish behavior. He didn't really care about his girlfriend. He didn't want her happiness. He wanted her to be there to provide him what he wanted for himself. But I said, why did you do this? Because I love her so much.
Right.
That's his answer. He thinks he loves her. This is not love.
Right.
This is codependency.
And see, I guess a lot of people would look at that and say, wow, he loved her so much he couldn't live without her, and so he was going to try to take his life.
Yeah, this was not...
in fact, there's an underlying selfishness
and
to
this
it
is
all.
the great counterfeit for love. This wasn't love at all. See, he loved himself.
Right.
And he loved what she did for him.
Okay.
But he didn't love her, the person, and care about her well-being, her happiness. He didn't care whether it was going to cause her grief, whether it was going to cause her suffering, whether it was going to cause her heartache. He didn't care whether she enjoyed being with him or not. He didn't care what was going to make her life better. He only cared that he didn't feel good when she wasn't there. And therefore, he did this to punish her so that she would regret breaking up with him and come back, I'm so sorry, I should have never broken up with you, please will you take me back?
Right.
This was not love, this was codependency.
So it kind of seems like there's two ends of the spectrum, that you can either be on the one that like forces love on somebody, and so they're codependent on somebody. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
No.
Probably not.
No. I'm not following there's the dominating person who is controlling that way.
Right. Is that kind of a dependency? Not really.
No, it's not the same thing. No,
thing.
That's not the same thing.
It's unhealthy, but
it's
not
unhealthy. No,
yeah.
So let's stick with the codependency. This is the person who has inadequacies, and they seek and they get confused. See, the person who's dominating and beating, they're not actually saying, I love you.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's really not it's I own you.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So
how can you tell the difference between the two?
So
healthy love and
the person who is in the position of the woman that I just described, not the man who overdosed, but the other person.
Yes.
They often, other than when it gets extreme like this, don't realize they're not being loved.
Okay.
They don't realize that they are simply an object that's being manipulated. They actually think they're being loved because the person
says that.
says they
love you
love
so
them,
much.
and maybe does nice things for them, buys them nice dresses, gets them a nice car, takes them on nice vacations, buys them diamond earrings, and all these things, say, well, he wouldn't do this if he didn't love me.
Right.
Okay? But see, they fail to recognize, and I use the metaphor of the cowboy and his horse.
I haven't heard that.
The metaphor of the cowboy and his horse? Okay, so the cowboy loves his horse, okay? And the cowboy gets the best feed for his horse, gets the best saddles for his horse, gets the best equipment. When after a hard run, we get it a rub down. The cowboy would be very jealous if someone tries to take his horse. Okay? Absolutely, okay?
Yes.
And he does all this thing for his horse, but he never really is concerned with what the horse wants, where the horse wants to go. He does all this because of what the horse does for him.
Okay.
Okay, the horse is there to serve him.
Right.
And many people have the significant other in their life that is there primarily in their way of operating to serve them.
Right.
And it might be physical service like cleaning and cooking. It might, but it's more often emotional service. They're there to serve me by making me feel good about me. You're there to worship me. You're there to adore me. You're there to praise me. You're there to comfort me. You're there to love me. You're there to take my personal shortcomings and failings and own them so I can blame you and it's never my fault.
Right.
Okay? You're there to be the garbage receptacle for all the emotional baggage that I have and I'm not mature enough to handle. Your job is to carry all that and I get to blame you and criticize you for everything.
Right.
Okay? And so they love you for the service that you do, but they don't love you for the person that you are.
Right. And so why do people stay in relationships like that? What's the draw? They're being mistreated, but in a way that somehow it feeds into their insecurities or?
So there's this term that's called complementary pathology.
Okay.
Okay, complementary pathology. Just think of the shape of the yin and the yang. Okay, the yin and the yang. Okay, you know they fit together as puzzle pieces.
Yes.
Okay, and so people are attracted to people with complementary pathology. There's some inadequacy in them that they feel filled, and so codependent. It's called codependent. Okay.
So they're each getting something.
And what they're getting is they're getting a sense of wholeness and fulfillment. So if you use the metaphor of a circle, and the circle, a complete circle would be an individual internal to themselves who is whole. They are content. They're at peace with themselves. They have confidence in themselves. They have a sense of well-being and a whole ego. They know who they are and they're at peace with who they are. Okay? Those people are able to enter into relationships with other people that are also healthy people, and they can go along through life sharing life together. Okay?
As whole individuals.
As whole individuals.
Okay.
But people that have gaps in those circles, okay, there's not a whole individual, there's gap in the circle.
Right.
The bigger the gap, the more insecurity, the more sense of inadequacy, the more sense of emptiness, the more sense of loneliness, the more sense they don't feel whole, they don't feel at peace. And that causes anxiety and uneasiness and emotional distress. And so people want wholeness, okay? And so they're going around searching for wholeness and they find somebody else who's got a big gap, and the two of them come together in this relationship and boom! And now when they come to in the relationship for a moment, what do we have? We have one whole circle.
Right.
But we now have two people.
Right.
Two people who, for the immediate establishment of the relationship, feel, oh, this is my soulmate. Oh, I feel so fulfilled. I feel so at one. I feel at peace for the first time in my life. I feel so complete. You're the puzzle. You're the piece I've been missing. Okay.
Right.
Okay. The problem here is though, we only have one circle. But we have two individualities and two identities that are going to try to control the circle.
Right. Okay.
Okay? So one person's going to want to do one thing, one person's going to do the other thing, and there's going to be this tug of war, there's going to be this manipulation, there's going to be this criticism. And so these relationships then function like this. There's oscillation. There'll be this initial coming together where it's all wonderful honeymoon, it's fantastic, it's the best intimacy we've ever had, blah, 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 blah. But then as time goes by, that initial rush of joy kind of goes past, and reality breaks in, and we have responsibilities and things to do, and there's this tug of war of who's going to do. We're going to go here, we're going to go there, and there's this tension, and the relationship starts to distance, and it starts to pull apart, and it gets to a certain distance that this terrible fear of losing the other one comes in, and there's desperation, there's panic, and then there's shoom, boom, reconciliation again, and these relationships operate like kind of like yo-yos or roller coasters
like
or a slink, back and forth like this, and you can see the cycle and pattern through these relationships.
Okay, so talk about cycles and patterns. Why do, and I see this all the time with the women in the prison, they will realize that they are codependent. They will end a relationship that's been terribly bad with bad results for them, and enter into the next relationship with the same type of a person? Why does that happen?
Because they recognize this is dysfunctional. They've been
Right.
mistreated. You are not the person finally get rid of you.
Right.
But they still have an open hole in their circle. Their sense of self has not been resolved. They haven't healed their inner person. And so rather than taking the time now after that dysfunctional relationship to say, you know what, I'm going to establish myself as a single person, not in any type of an intimate relationship, and work on coming to peace with myself and contentment where I actually have joy and fulfillment and wholeness in life as a single person. In other words, they're going to work on closing that gap as an individual.
Right.
Rather than doing that, they are so thankful to be out of this relationship, but then they go and they find somebody else, and that other person they find will just end up plugging the gap, makes them feel so validated, so loved, feel whole. It's finally, but they're only finding people who have the complementary pathology. It's destined to repeat unless they take the time to heal what's broken in them that leads to those relationships in the first place.
Right, because that pain of that unbrokenness seeks out, if it's not going to seek to close, to
Right.
become, is going to seek out another person once again to fill that hole.
And healthy people will not participate in that.
So-
people with their own whole egos and ego structure do not find this kind of desperate, insecure, needy business attractive. So,
Okay, so then that's a certain type of relationship. Codependency.
Yeah.
You can't have a healthy person. No,
Right.
because they're codependent.
yeah. And so let me give a metaphor for our listeners about why you don't want to have a need-based pursuit of a relationship. It's okay to want somebody. It's okay to desire a relationship. It's okay to
not
long
wanna
for a
be
relationship.
alone.
See, God, in fact, in my view, God has designed us for a relationship. So we have a natural desire to have another person in our life, to love and to be loved, to cherish, to be understood by. This is God's design, and it's healthy to have desires. Nothing wrong with the desire. Okay. But there's a problem when the desire goes from just something you want to something that you need. And I want to let our audience think about that for just a moment. Think about and take a moment as we're coming up on a break. And during the break, think, what's the difference when I pursue a relationship because I need one versus pursuing a relationship because I want one? What's that difference? And see if you can identify in your own mind what those differences are. And we're going to unpack that when we come back from this break in just a few moments, okay?
That sounds very intriguing to be able to see what that difference is.
Because it's the need for the relationship is really what drives the pathology. And we want to actually pursue a relationship. It's okay to pursue one because you want one, but it really isn't okay to pursue one because you need one. So we're going to unpack that when we come back from break.
Okay, sounds great. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings with your Mental Health Minute. Whether you call it wacky tobacco, ganja, pot, or marijuana, the impact it has on your brain is not good. New research by Dr. Madeline Meyer from Duke University documents that adolescents who smoke marijuana before the age of 18 experience an 8-point drop in IQ scores that persist well into adulthood, and quitting did not fully restore intellectual functioning. This drop is significant as the average person has an IQ of 100, placing them at the 50th percentile for intelligence. A drop in 8 points would place the person at the 29th percentile for intelligence. This dramatically reduces one's ability to succeed later in life. Other research documents that those who smoke marijuana have higher rates of psychosis, and the risk increases with greater use. To be smart requires a healthy brain. So be smart. Say nope to the dope.
To learn more about mental health, visit comeandreason.com.
Have you ever heard things about God that didn't make sense? Have you ever thought that science and scripture cannot be reconciled? Have you heard ideas about God that scare you? Or are you just tired and confused? If you want answers to complex problems, if you want a testable, evidence-based understanding of God and the world around you, an understanding in which the Bible and science harmonize to reveal the reality that God is love all the time, then Come and Reason Ministries is for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, board-certified psychiatrist, and Come and Reason Ministries is dedicated to helping you learn to discern, to stimulate you to think, to help hone and refine your ability to know the right from the wrong, the healthy from the unhealthy, and teach you how to experience healing of your mind, body, and relationships here and now. If you would like an evidence-based approach to knowing God, then visit us online at comeandreason.com.
welcome back to the Dr. Tim Jennings Show. And today we're talking about healthy love versus love addiction. And right before the break, we were talking about need and want of a relationship. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so unpack it
yes.
for us.
So let me give you this metaphor.
Okay.
I want you to imagine you're scuba diving.
Yes.
Okay, and you've gotten your leg pinned under a rock, you're trapped, your tank is running out of air. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a guy that was on the boat that was scuba diving with you, and you actually saw him before you got on. And this guy was unwashed. He had teeth he didn't brush. He had big old chaw tobacco in his mouth. Okay, and that's kind of was kind of repulsive on the boat. Anyway, you're this guy. You're pinned. You've just run out of air. You have no more air in your tank. And he comes and he sees you desperately struggling over there, and he swims over and he offers to buddy breathe with you.
Right.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to take it and I'm going to breathe.
You're absolutely going to take it and breathe. Why? Because you need
Okay.
oxygen.
Yes.
Now, let's change the scenario.
Okay.
You're in the dive shop and you're looking for a new regulator. That's the piece you put in your mouth. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And as you're looking at the various regulators, this same guy comes in, big chaw tobacco in his mouth, and he walks up and he grabs one of those regulators, he sticks it in his mouth, and he goes, "Oh, this is pretty comfortable. Here, try." What do you do now?
I'm going to turn and run.
See, you want a new regulator here, but you don't need one.
Okay.
See, when you need something, you lose the ability to discriminate. You lose the ability to differentiate. When you have a need for something, you will just grab onto anything that comes along that even closely will approximate that need. But when you want something but don't need it, you have the ability when a guy comes along and offers to get in a relationship, but he's got all kinds of pathology and stuff, you're able to say, "No, I do want a relationship, but thank you, no thank you."
So I guess it comes back to the things that we've talked about before when it's exercising your reason and self-control and working on yourself to close that circle, to become whole, instead
Yes.
of looking for another person to make you whole.
Right, and so people have to be willing to tolerate the emotions, and what happens is they feel
Right.
empty, they
Right.
feel lonely, and they're looking outside of themselves for someone to fill them, to make them whole, and that never works. It's
Right.
not possible. It's outside of design law. If you're looking for another human being to make you whole, you will only repeat cycles of dysfunction over and over again. Now, there is one place you can look outside yourself to find wholeness, but it's not in another person.
Okay.
It's in Jesus Christ.
Okay.
In a relationship with the true Creator God, who's a God of love, you can look to find healing. The one who designed us and built us and constructed us can take the broken pieces and can put them together in a healthy way. So in a relationship and pursuing a healthy relationship with God, which is a God of love, not an authoritarian dictator, not a punishing God, not somebody who just makes up rules and is going to punish you for breaking it. That's not God. That's a false God.
Okay.
But a God of beneficence, of love, of compassion, then in that relationship you can find your true identity and you can find healing for your heart.
How do you move into that relationship, Dr. Jennings, if you've never had a relationship with God and you know you're broken and you need some answers so that you can get out of the patterns that you continue to live? How do you begin that relationship with God? What does that look like?
So
What are
that
some practical
same
things?
passion that you were pursuing a human relationship with,
Right.
you need to say, humans, I've gone down 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 of these, and they always come out bad.
Right.
I'm going to pursue a relationship, put that same passion into finding God instead. I'm going to put my energy into finding God. I'm going to spend time in His Word. I'm going to spend time listening and talking to other people who have experience with God, reading Christian materials and meditation and nature and trying to contemplate and understand what am I seeing in nature that teaches me about how life actually works. Okay? So it's a really of turning your mind's eye outward, reaching with your heart in to connect with the supreme being of the universe, informing yourself from a reliable source of how He works and what His methods are like, okay? And putting your problems before Him. He will answer.
And so I think we need to be careful because I believe in the Bible it says you're supposed to submit. And I think we've talked about this.
Submit to what?
Submit to, like, your husband.
Okay.
You're supposed to be in submission.
Okay, so it's not blind submission.
Okay.
You're not to submit to abuse.
Right.
You're not to submit to exploitation.
Right.
You're not to submit to cheating. You're to submit to Christ-like treatment. And so if you're married to a man who's authoritarian and dictatorial and abusive and domineering in the name of Jesus and quoting Bible scriptures
Right.
at you,
Right.
this man is not a Christian.
Okay.
He's not, because
Right.
he's not like Christ. Christ didn't operate this way. He is a false Christian. He is somebody who is using the principles and methods of Satan's kingdom under the umbrella of Christian tapestry to abuse and injure. And so a real Christian wife in a situation like that has the responsibility to bring the principles of Christ to bear, which means that she stands up for truth in a loving way and says, I love you too much to collude with this type of dysfunction. And so the answer to you is no, I don't submit to this because it's wrong. It's injurious. It's harmful. And it's not only harmful to me. If I submit to this, it sears your conscience. It hardens your heart. It warps your character. It's harmful to you. So no, I love you too much. I love me too much. I love God too much. Love says no to dysfunction and unhealthy tactics.
So a person, their first responsibility is to self and to make sure that self is healthy.
Well, people could hear that and they would say the first responsibility is to make self happy and to fulfill all the desires of the self and to be self-inflated no.
No, that's
okay.
not what I'm, yeah.
No, our first responsibility is to God.
Okay.
First responsibility is not to self.
Okay.
It's to God.
Right.
That's our first responsibility.
Okay.
And in that first responsibility to God, though, when you submit to God and you ask God to work in your life, then God does certain things. And the Bible describes the things that happen when you let God work in your life. You get love, patience, peace, joy, kindness, and the last, there's fruits of the Spirit. These are traits of character you develop. The last one is self-control.
Right.
Okay, get your mind around. When you surrender to God, you don't lose control of yourself. You don't become a puppet pulled around on the strings of some higher being. No, that's not what happens.
Okay.
What happens is God restores to you your actual self-governance, that you are free and you're making decisions and governance of yourself. It's the only way to find yourself and be yourself. And that's the type of submission. So a real submitting a wife to a Christ-like husband, the husband's actions are constantly designed to help restore into the wife self-control, self-governance, builds her autonomy, builds her individuality. Anything that undermines and damages that is not Christ-like.
Okay. And so you have to make the decision for yourself as to whether or not that you need to get well.
Yes, but people in codependent relationships don't do that because they live in fear. They live in fear of rejection. They live in fear of abandonment. They live in fear of not being loved. They live in fear of being alone. And they have this false premise inside their head that it is better to be with anyone than to be alone.
Right.
And what they have to learn is the truth. And the truth is, no, it's actually better. You're healthier. Your life is actually less traumatic. You have less injury. You have less heartache, less crying, less depression, living as a single person than living with someone who mistreats you.
Right. As painful as you may think it be.
That's right.
It's better to walk away.
It's better to live as a single person than to live with the wrong person.
Right. Okay. In your book, Could It Be This Simple? You have a chapter on love.
Yes.
And what are some attributes that are healthy versus dependency of love that you can share with us?
Yes, so I do have a contrast where I go back and forth between those. And so if you're in a relationship in which you're going, well, I wonder if my relationship's a love relationship or it's a dependent relationship, in the chapter 8, the very last paragraph in chapter 8 of my book, Could It Be This Simple, there is a list of these things you can contrast. And you just simply say, is this my relationship or is this my relationship? And you can check. And you're going to very quickly diagnose, is this a love relationship or a dependency relationship? But I'll give you some examples. Okay. Love is healing. Dependency is destructive.
Okay.
So you then say, okay, I've been in a relationship for 6 years. Over the last 6 years, am I healthier now? More mature? Have more peace? Have I grown? Have I gotten better capacities to think, reason, more self-confidence over the last 6 years in this relationship? Or have I gotten more insecure, more fearful, more depressed, more uncertain, more doubtful? Have I been damaged by this relationship? That's evidence.
There's your answer.
Okay, and so you know which way it's working there. Love is freeing. Dependency is controlling. In my relationship, do I experience that I have freedom to be me? I'm accepted for who I am. I can express myself. I can share my thoughts without fear of retaliation, without fear of punishment. I have real freedom in this relationship. Or do I feel coercion? Do I feel pressure? Do I feel like I have to monitor my thoughts? Do I walk on eggshells for fear of the consequence? Okay?
Right.
Codependency and dependency relationships, there is not freedom in the relationship.
Okay.
Love is other-centered. I'm actually interested in the welfare of the other, what's good for them, whereas a dependency is interested in getting for the self. And many people get tricked on this one because they think, yeah, well, it must be love because I'm always doing that. I'm cleaning for him. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing the other thing. And so I'm doing all this stuff for him, so it must be love. Stop and pause when I ask the question, but why are you doing it? Are you doing it simply to be a blessing for them, or are you doing it to make sure that they're happy with you? Why are you doing it?
Okay.
And if you're doing it so they're happy with you, and you can't tolerate the fact that they might not be happy with you, that's not actually love. That's dependency. You're doing it to get something in return.
Right.
And many people do that kind of stuff. And they actually live in fear of them. And so they won't stand up to do what's objectively good.
Right.
So, for instance, the classic wife married to the alcoholic husband. Well, I go buy him alcohol. Why? Because it makes him happy. Okay,
Right.
And I want him to be happy with me. He'll be mad at me if I don't.
Right.
But if you actually love your alcoholic husband, you don't buy him the alcohol.
Right.
You'll tolerate
Because
his
that's damaging to
because
him.
it's destructive to him. That's
Right.
exactly right. Okay, love is stable. Dependency is wavering. And so you look at, I've been in this relationship for 3 years, been in this relationship for 10 years. Over the course of 10 years, is our relationship a stable relationship? Or is it like a roller coaster? Is that yo-yo that we talked about earlier?
Right.
Okay? If it's the yo-yo and the roller coaster, it's not a love relationship. It's a codependency relationship. Love is without fear. Dependency is fear-ridden. So you look at your relationship. Do you have a lot in this relationship? I'm afraid of what he thinks. I'm afraid of him being mad. I'm afraid that she's going to leave me. I'm afraid she's going to be with somebody else. I'm afraid that he might think I'm fat. I'm afraid he's going to think I've this. I'm afraid. If you got all these fears in your relationship, this is not a love relationship.
Okay.
Perfect love casts out fear. When you actually have love in your relationship, you don't fear what the other person thinks of you. You know they see you for who you are completely, and you are loved and cherished for who you are. There's no fear in that anymore. Okay? Love is reliable. Dependency is unreliable. These are tests you can do. So do you find that in your relationship, both partners are reliable? They're dependable. They keep their word. You can trust them. Or do you find that it's unreliable, that they say they're going to do things and then things don't get done like they say? And there's always an excuse. There's always a reason. Oh, I forgot. There's other thing. But it just is unpredictable and unreliable. Then it's not probably a love relationship. Love is honest and truthful. Dependency is dishonest and deceitful. And it's not simply the overt dishonesty of lying to each other. The biggest dishonesty in dependency relationship is dishonesty to the self. Deceiving oneself to believe that this is love when it's not love. Deceiving oneself that you're actually doing it for the other person when you're actually doing it to get for yourself.
Right.
This is the dishonesty.
Yes.
Okay? I'm really not afraid when I'm really afraid. And there are more of these. I think I'll say one more. Dependency, love is forgiving. Dependency holds grudges. If you're in a relationship where there's always a list, and that list comes back. Whenever they're crossed, there's that list of all the things, and that list never seems to go away.
Right.
That's a dependency relationship. In a love relationship, the lists aren't there. They get forgotten, and they moved on.
Right. So if you have a question for Dr. Jennings, please go to timjenningsmd.com and submit your questions and get some other material that's available there, and join us next time.